Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Ayah number 197. قال الله تعالى: الحج أشهر معلومات فمن فرض فيهن الحج فلا رفث ولا فسوق ولا جدال في الحج وما تفعلوا من خير يعلمه الله وتزودوا فإن خير الزاد التقوى واتقوا الله يا ulilalbaab. He says Al-Hajj, which we spoke about before, is the known months. What it means to say is that Hajj is performed in the known months. The known months spoken of here are Shawwal, Dhul Qa'dah and Dhul Hijjah. Many say it is the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah and not the whole of Dhul Hijjah, but it is better to say that it is the whole of Dhul Hijjah because the rites of the Hajj can be performed after the first 10 days. For example, the stoning of the Jamrah and the Tawaf al-Ifadah and the Tawaf al-Wada' can be performed after the first 10 days. You have the rest of Dhul Hijjah to perform them. فَمَنْ فَرَضَ فِيهِنَّ الْحَجِّ. Farada normally means to make something obligatory. What it refers to here is whoever intends to perform the Hajj during these months by entering into the Ihram. Then there are some restrictions on him. He says, فَلَا رَفَث. We said normally Rafath means vulgar language, but here it refers to conjugal relations with the wife. And that also includes fondling and foreplay and so on. وَلَا فُسُوق, from fisq. Fisq is when you are disobedient, you leave the fold of disobedience. So of course this includes all sorts of things which cannot be enumerated. But one might say, is fusuq not haram every time? The answer is of course, it's haram every time. However, what the ayah means to say here is that if you truly want the full reward of the Hajj, then stop your sinning. If you are sinning and you perform the Hajj, your Hajj is still accepted, but it is not of the full reward. As how the Prophet said, whoever performs the Hajj and does not commit rafath nor fusuq, he returns just as the day his mother gave birth to him. Wala jidala, no argumentation. Again, these futile argumentations are haram all throughout the year, but they are even more emphasized during the Hajj. It's a similar thing with fasting as well. Evil speech is haram all the time, but it is more emphasized during the fasting because you are in a sacred state. For example, using vulgar language is haram, but imagine somebody using vulgar language in a masjid. This carries an extra layer of ugliness because of the sacred place you're in. And then he says, whatever good you do, Allah knows it. Now, of course, the intended meaning behind this is that Allah will reward you for it. Notice how he talks about doing good proactively after he speaks about refraining from evil deeds. And he's hinting at us here that instead of rafath, you practice chastity during the ihram. And instead of fusuq, you practice taqwa. And instead of jidal, which is argumentation, you practice wifaq, agreement, and being amiable. So replace the sin with its righteous alternative. And then he says, وَتَزَوَّدُوا, from zad, which means provisions. So tazawwada, to take provisions. And the best provision is taqwa. What's all this about? This was revealed about some people in Yemen who traveled to Mecca and they did not take any provisions with them. They said, we are going to rely on Allah after all. We are going to His house. He will feed us. When they reached Mecca, they found no provisions and they had to beg of people. So this ayah is telling us to take your provisions, and that this is from tawakkul on Allah Jalla wa Ala, to take your provisions and precautions. So yes, it's true, Allah will feed you, but Allah does things through their asbab, through their causes. So He will feed you through the cause of you taking your provisions with you. So the asbab, the causes, are from tawakkul on Allah. And then he tells us that the best provision is taqwa. He makes an analogy between the physical provision and the non-physical. So the physical provision keeps you alive, it nourishes you, it is beneficial for you. But guess what? Taqwa does the same thing, not physically, but in terms of guiding you and giving you spiritual life, if you want to use that word. And we find this as a theme in the Quran. He makes an analogy between physical life and the life of guidance or spiritual life. He talks about sending rain down to give life to the earth. And then he talks about sending messengers. Okay, so what's the common thread? The rain is sent to give physical, biological life. Without plant life, there would be no animal and human life. While in the same way, without messengers, there would be no guidance, and so there would be no life in that sense. Everybody in the world would be spiritually dead. He says, wattaqooni, fear me. Ya, harful nida, calling out. Uli, meaning owners of, or those who possess. Albab, the plural of lub, which means sound intellect and sound understanding. And he addresses them with taqwa, even though you could argue the whole of mankind is ordered with taqwa. He addresses them because the evidence is established against them, not against insane people. That's the first point. And the second point is that they are the ones who are going to uphold the rules and regulations of Allah Jalla wa Ala. So the message will be effective against them, not against the one whose heart is sealed. Okay, let's reflect on this ayah. The first point is immediately a point of ishkal. Something unclear and problematic to us is that Hajj is performed over a period of 6 days, from the 8th till the 13th. Sure, it is possible to go beyond 13, but normally it is these 6 days. And yet Allah Jalla wa Ala says that they are months. They are 3 months that we referred to. And the reason is, during the months of the Hajj, no fighting is allowed, and the Arab, even in Jahiliyyah, agreed upon this. And so when people are preparing for the Hajj, they need time. So Allah Jalla wa Ala has created this safe space, or if you like, safe time for them. And we may also take from this that the ihram of the Hajj may be entered into during these months. So that is to say, even from Shawwal and Dhul Qa'dah, you may enter into the ihram. And why would you want to do this? Well, maybe you're performing the tamattu', and so the umrah can be performed in Shawwal or Dhul Qa'dah. Then you can release yourself and then perform the Hajj during the known 6 days, and that would count as a tamattu'. Whereas if you perform the umrah before Shawwal, that would not count as a tamattu'. So in other words, the ihram for the Hajj is to be made in the proper time, which is from Shawwal, and it can be Dhul Qa'dah, and of course on the 8th day of Dhul Hijjah, which is when you go out to Mina. So that is, if you entered into ihram before the months of Hajj, this would not count as your Hajj. It would be like praying before its proper time. Notice how he says, فَمَنْ فَرَضَ فِيهِنَّ, in them, meaning in the known months, which means this ruling does not apply to outside of these known months. If he enters the ihram outside the months of the Hajj, then the ihram certainly counts, but he has to perform the umrah, not the actual Hajj. Another view on this matter is that this ihram counts for literally nothing, neither the Hajj nor the umrah. However, we do not see anything wrong with changing your intention to umrah to release yourself from the ihram. After all, if you are performing the Hajj during the months of the Hajj and you missed Arafah, then of course you have no Hajj, but you can release yourself from the ihram by performing the umrah. And so there again you see a change of intention, and there appears to be no problem with this. And Allah knows best. We may take that whoever enters the ihram in these months, then he must complete the Hajj which he intended. He's not allowed to change his mind and say, well, I do not want to anymore. Because the word used is farada, which means to make obligatory. So obligatory means you cannot just change your mind. That would be a recommendation. And then besides, you may remember we took the ayah, وَأَتِمُّ الْحَجَّ وَالْعُمْرَةَ لِلَّهِ, the command to complete the Hajj and the Umrah for Allah. We find that the Ihram is a sacred state, and certain things in which the haram is even more haram, and certain halal things are made haram as well. The detail of that is in the books of fiqh. However, this idea of arguing, now normally you do not argue. Argumentative people are misguided, and arguments misguide people. However, if you have to establish evidence against someone who is doing something which is obviously wrong, as in obviously haram, with no difference of opinion, then yes, you may establish evidence against them and refute any of their claims. So arguing there by way of enjoining the good or forbidding the evil remains an obligation even in the state of ihram. But you're not allowed to argue about fiqhi matters on which there is a difference of opinion. For example, if a person is performing Hajj different to how you know it to be, or just doing anything different to how you know it to be, and there's a difference of opinion among scholars in this matter, then no, do not argue about these matters. As opposed to if somebody is drinking alcohol, or gambling, or listening to music, then these are clear-cut matters about which there is no difference of opinion, at least not in any substantive way, as there could be some anomalies, but we do not give any consideration to anomalies. We take the obligation of replacing the evil with the good, and whatever good you do, Allah knows it and will reward you for it. So this is an impetus to perform righteous actions. We take the obligation to fear Allah Jalla wa Ala. We may also take from this that the more taqwa somebody has, the more lub he has, understanding and sound intellect. And the less taqwa somebody has, the less lub he has, the less understanding and sound intellect. Because Allah Jalla wa Ala links taqwa to the lub. Plural, of course, is albab, which means the more, and the less. Ayah 198. ليس عليكم جناح أن تبتغوا فضلا من ربكم فإذا أفضتم من عرفات فاذكروا الله عند المشعر الحرام واذكروه كما هداكم وإن كنتم من قبله لمن الضالين. The first part of the ayah is dispelling some misgivings that the people had. They did not want to trade during the Hajj season because they said that this is the time of ibadah, of dhikr, and not for trade, so it is not fitting. And Allah is saying here, no, there is no sin upon you to trade during the Hajj season. So when he says tabtaghu, seek, fadl, the grace, min rabbikum, from your Rabb, what he's referring to is trade, because that's how you earn money, and that is from the grace of Allah. And then he says, when you make ifada from Arafat, normally when we talk about afada yufidu, it means to be full or flooded. So what it refers to here, when you flood out from Arafah, meaning leave Arafah, because the people, when they leave Arafah, it's going to be like a flood of people leaving Arafah. You will never see in the Hajj 1 or 2 people leaving the Arafah. You know what Arafah is like. There are millions upon millions of people at Arafah. Now here he uses the word Arafat instead of Arafah, and they both can be used, the singular and the plural. As for why this place is called Arafah, from the verb Arafa ya'rifu, there are various opinions. From them is that they say in this place of Arafah, which is demarcated, people make i'tiraf, you see the same root letters, confess their sins as they seek forgiveness. Another suggestion is that this is the place of ta'aruf, when you get to know each other, because millions of people are standing in this place and you become familiar with each other. Another suggestion is that Jibreel alayhi salam was teaching Adam alayhi salam the rites of the Hajj, and when he reached this particular place he said Araft, I know it, or I recognize it. Another suggestion is when Adam a.s. and his wife Hawa were cast down from Jannah, they reached this place and they knew each other. So this was the Arafah. Another suggestion is that this place, Arafah, is actually an elevated place. It is slightly higher than its surrounding vicinity. And when a place is elevated and higher, it is called Urf. And we have a whole surah named after this word, Surat Al-A'raf, the plural of Urf, which is an elevated place. And this last suggestion does seem to make sense. The other suggestions may be true, but they are reliant heavily on authentic evidence, whereas the last suggestion is self-evident. So he says, when you pour out from Arafah, فَاذْكُرُوا make a dhikr of Allah, at the al-Mash'ar al-Haram. So Mash'ar is a place of the ritual, and al-Haram means sacred. The Hajj has many masha'ir, of course, Arafah being one of them. You have Mina, you have Muzdalifah. What this Mash'ar is referring to is a small mountain at Muzdalifah. And it is also said that the whole of the Muzdalifah is a Mash'ar Haram, because it is a sacred place of ibadah. And he says, remember him, kama hadakum, as he has guided you, meaning because he has guided you. So you are thanking Allah Jalla wa Ala for guiding you. And you can only thank him by performing acts of ibadah such as dhikr. And he says, wa in kuntum. Now it ordinarily would have been wa innakum kuntum, with the inna, meaning indeed or verily you had been before that misguided. But sometimes inna can have the shadda removed and become in, and this also happens in the Quran. Some have said that in means qad, so it would read you had been aforetime misguided, and they are similar in meaning. And note when he says min qablihi, the ha, what does that refer to? Some say it refers to the Quran, some say it refers to the Messenger, some say it refers to guidance. And all three of them are not contradictory. So in other words, before the guidance came to you, you were misguided. And that's clear enough. Okay, let's reflect on this ayah. We take the big lesson that during the Hajj, you can make use of this opportunity to trade and make money. As long as your primary intention is the Hajj, then a secondary intention for trade is absolutely permissible. Just like fighting in the way of Allah. You may make your intention for the war booty, but as long as your primary intention is to fight to make the word of Allah the highest. And all of this does not negate ikhlas. We take that after Arafah, your next stop is Muzdalifah, where you spend the night, and in the morning, that is after Salat al-Fajr, you make a dhikr of Allah Jalla wa Ala. We can also take that Muzdalifah is in the Haram area, because he says al-Mash'ar al-Haram, the sacred Mash'ar, place of worship. It should be noted that if you cannot stay at the small mountain in Muzdalifah, then any place in Muzdalifah is appropriate, as the Prophet has told us in the narrations. We take from this ayah that we must always keep in mind that Allah has guided us, and therefore we are obligated to give him thanks. As he says, وَاذْكُرُوهُ كَمَا هَدَاكُمْ, and we translate kama to ta'leel, because he has guided you. We also take that if you were in a worse off state before, and Allah favored you and gave you blessings, then remember your worse off state. This will increase your appreciation for what Allah has done for you. If, for example, you were homeless, and then thereafter Allah Jalla wa Ala granted you a home, then remember the fact that you were homeless. Do not take any blessing for granted. Ayah 199. ثُمَّ أَفِيضُوا مِنْ حَيْثُ أَفَاضَ النَّاسُ وَاسْتَغْفِرُوا اللَّهَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. Now, afidu from ifada, we have spoken about this before, it means pour out, from where the people pour out. Now, there are two opinions on this matter. The first opinion is that it refers to Arafah, and the background is that the Quraysh would actually not go to Arafah, because Arafah is outside the Haram, and they would say, no, we are people of Allah, we are people of the Haram, we will not leave Haram. Whereas the other Arab, other than the Quraysh, would stop at Arafah. This is even during the days of Jahiliyyah. So Allah Jalla wa Ala is saying here in this ayah, no, pour out from where the people pour out, meaning from Arafah. Do not just restrict yourself to Muzdalifah. The Quraysh used to be called Hums by the other Arab, which means strictly religious, because they would not leave the Haram area. The second opinion on this matter is that the pouring out referred to in this ayah is not from Arafah, it is from Muzdalifah, because Arafah was spoken of in the previous ayah. And so this ayah is now speaking about pouring out from Muzdalifah, when you go from Muzdalifah to Mina, where you're going to stone the Jamratul Aqaba. Now the people of the first opinion would answer this by saying that the word thumma does not mean and then, what it normally means. So and then would mean a chronological order, first and then second. They say no, thumma here does not mean chronological order. They say it means tartib dhikri. So in English we would translate it to furthermore. Now when you say furthermore, that does not denote a chronological order. Now the argument would make sense, except you can still counter this by saying, what's your evidence that this is tartib dhikri and not tartib hukmi? So tartib dhikri would be translated to furthermore, and tartib hukmi would be translated to and then. So this would be chronological order. So you can have this debate, and both tafasir are understandable. And one may even say that it means both, because it's not a contradiction. You do pour out from Arafah, and you do pour out from Muzdalifah, which is where the people pour out from. And he says, وَاسْتَغْفِرُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. We have spoken about these words before. So let's reflect on this ayah. If we take the ifadah in this ayah from Arafah, then we would have to say that staying at Muzdalifah is wajib because of the order. We can also take that this ritual of Hajj is something that has been taking place for years and years amongst the people. It is not anything new. Allah in this ayah orders us to seek forgiveness. Notice when He does that, after completing this major act of ibadah. And this is analogous to the salah. After you complete the salah, it is sunnah to say astaghfirullah 3 times. This is what the Prophet would do. So after major acts of ibadah, seek forgiveness, because there could be shortcomings in your act of ibadah. And seeking forgiveness will hopefully mend those shortcomings. We also take the 2 names of Allah, Ghafoor and Rahim, and it is appropriate to mention those names after issuing the order to seek forgiveness. Wallahu a'lam.